This is a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online, the online resource for all construction professionals that's available 24/7. Now, don't forget to subscribe at the place you usually get your podcasts so as not to miss a thing from the second series, as well as visiting our YouTube channel. Hello again and welcome to another podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. As usual, Barney, my red Labrador, is here to offer advice and to keep an eye on the content. And by the way, Barney and I would really appreciate it if you were to write a review. If you're new to Duncan Cartlidge Online podcasts, welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe, as well as catching up with previous episodes. If you are already a subscriber, thank you for your support. In this jam-packed episode, we look at mental health in the construction industry, Grenfell, can you believe it was 2017, more bad news on skills shortages, and a licensing scheme for domestic builders. So, we'll kick off with mental health in construction. In 1990, I was in Dundee in Scotland and met an American academic, called, believe it or not, Roberta Chestnut. She was working in research and was constantly telling me how stressful she found her job. It was the first time that I had heard the term used in this context, and I thought, although I didn't say it at the time, what are you talking about? Stress? You should try running a small business. This just goes to show what meat and drink to some people is stressful to others. Since then, of course, and post-COVID, stress has become a national epidemic. Not that I am in any way trying to deride the problems of mental health, particularly in light of the following statistic. The 12th to the 18th of May was Mental Health Awareness Week. A provisional figure released by the Office for National Statistics shows a staggering 355 people working in skilled construction and building trades died by suicide in 2024. That's the equivalent of one person every day. This is one of the highest figures compared to other industries, and of course, as work on site is 99% carried out by men, it is predominantly, but not exclusively, a male problem in construction. In 2020, the CIOB published its first report into mental health in construction, entitled Understanding Mental Health in the Built Environment. This has now been followed up with a new report published on the 12th of May. The new report is based on a survey of people working in construction and attempts to determine what progress, if any, has been made during the past 5 years, and how widespread poor mental health is in the construction industry. The report goes on to analyse what steps are organisations, from SEMs to large contractors, taking to help their employees manage their mental health. Among the CIOB's 2025 report's key findings are that in 2024, 94% of those interviewed experienced stress and 83 experienced anxiety. And of those who said they were neurodiverse, that includes common conditions such as autism, ADHD and dyslexia, a condition incidentally that I suffer from myself, as well as many other conditions. Over half the respondents stated that working in the industry had made their mental health worse. During the early part of my career, the traditional macho culture in the construction industry took no prisoners. I was told, in no uncertain terms, to man up and get on with it, or find another job. It has long been recognised that construction is a high-stress industry, due to a range of factors, including an industry with a high degree of self-employment, where sole traders try to balance current workload with getting new work, dealing with admin such as HMRC, VAT, etc., making a profit, getting paid, and dealing with disputes. In addition, there are other factors including construction contracts are by their very nature limited term contracts, and there is often uncertainty over where future work will come from. Working in isolation, particularly for sole traders. Long hours and lengthy commutes to far-flung building sites. Time away from family and friends. I'm sure we've all stayed at those well-known 3-star hotels where the car park is full of white vans. These leave in the mornings before everybody else has had their breakfast. And pressure to complete work on time and within budget. It is probable that the recent increase in national insurance contributions will impact on employment and make staffing levels even lower, thereby generating increased pressure on meeting deadlines. In addition to, let's call them, headline contributors to stress and anxiety, the report investigated the impacts of other workplace-related issues that I must confess I have never regarded as significant. For example, lack of privacy on site. That's to say, no access to dedicated break rooms. Something that in my experience I have never come across. Inadequate toileting facilities, with toilets being located too far away from where people are working, toilets being used as storage facilities and having restricted access to toilets, which are kept locked by the site manager. How many times have you come across a bottle of what looks like iron brew on site? To be avoided, bit like yellow snow. Moving swiftly on, and more seriously, toilet facilities is an increasingly important factor if construction wishes to become more diverse and attract Gen Z. Generally, for most stress-inducing factors, it was noticeable in this CIOB research that it was the 18 to 25-year-old group for whom the stress levels were highest, whereas for the older age groups, stressful situations appeared to be more tolerated. Well, perhaps they've just become used to it and manned up, so to speak. Another stress point was poor catering facilities, with poor or no catering facilities when working on site. Those who found this most stressful were mainly supervisors and skilled manual workers. Again, an important issue for Gen Z and the industry that wants to attract them. Another factor was inadequate temperature control. Now, I'm not trying to be cynical here, but when working in construction, particularly on site, weather and temperature is not something that can be easily controlled. Nevertheless, the CIOB found 42% of respondents found inadequate temperature control stressful, and there was a call for better heating and cooling systems to reduce the impact of global warming, both for working on site and in office-based roles. Possible solutions are cited as easily accessible water stations, scheduling regular rest at periods, and access to heaters or cooling units. When it comes to what type of support is currently being offered by organisations, or for the self-employed, what support is provided on site, there are no surprises. It appears that people who work for large organisations, that is, over 500 employees, found support easier to access. However, for those employed by a small business or sole trader, they still found support was not at all accessible. Perhaps one possible solution, if you think back to the pandemic years, is to work for some or all of the week from home, as the benefits from this style of hybrid working became apparent, particularly when it came to work-life balance. It proved to be good for well-being and can help reduce stress, as employees have more control of their work-life balance, and reduces the time and the cost associated with commuting. Although I must admit, I'm unsure about how compatible hybrid working is for site-based workers. Since the 6th of April 2024, the right to request flexible working became a day one right in the UK. so employees can now request a change to their working location from their first day of employment. A recent survey by the International Workspace Group amongst recruitment organisations found that 3/4 of respondents have seen candidates turn down new roles because they did not offer hybrid working, while 72% said companies that do not offer hybrid working are becoming less competitive in the job market. In an interesting recent development, a borough council in England introduced a requirement for its contractors to include mental health statements in their construction bids, in what is believed to be the first in the country. The local authority now requires main contractors to include a scored statement of the mental well-being of their staff and subcontractors in its construction tender processes. The questionnaire includes a box asking contractors to indicate whether they are registered with a health and safety accreditation body and to provide details of their current accreditation level. This section must be included in all works, building, electrical maintenance and construction projects to support mental health in construction initiatives. One thing is for certain: the suicide level amongst construction workers is unacceptable, and more must be done to counter the traditional macho mindset. And now, on to the next topic. Grenfell. Can you believe it was 8 years ago? I have said in a previous podcast that, as a humble quantity surveyor, I have always assumed that the integrity of a new project was in safe hands. After all, we've got the building regs, building control, fire engineers, the BRE, that's the Building Research Establishment, the Agreement Board, industry experts, Certification and Accreditation Board, the National House Building Council, planners, etc., etc. Try getting a dodgy design past that lot. As they say in Scotland, nae chance. Grenfell proved how delusional I have been. How could this possibly have happened? And have I been complicit in this tragedy? Briefly, the Grenfell Tab block of flats had recently been upgraded with a cladding system comprising insulation boards protected by rain screen panels, containing a highly combustible core. Even so, at the time, this was all within the existing regulations. The cladding allowed a comparatively minor electrical fire to spread rapidly over the facade. 8 years on, and over 70 people died on that June night. How have the industry and the regulators responded? In a word, slowly. Very slowly. Sorry, I know, that's 3 words. As a direct consequence of Grenfell, the Building Safety Act was introduced to improve safety standards in higher-rise residential buildings. One of the most significant requirements of the Act is the need for a second staircase. This has resulted in some schemes that had previously been given approval having to go back to the digital drawing board, as it were, causing massive delays, with some projects that were already on site having to be redesigned. The cost implications alone have made some schemes unviable, leading to their cancellation or, at best, having significant delays. In addition, there's the whole question of regulating construction projects. That's to say, making sure that the materials and products obtained from a variety of sources and countries are safe to use in the UK. In 2021, Paul Morell, a one-time partner of Davis Langton and a former chief construction advisor to the government, and Annalise Day, KC, delivered their independent review into the construction products testing regime. The review then sat on the shelf for 14 months until eventually being published in April 2023, with consultation on the report only being carried out now. The problem appears to be that the UK is unclear about the nature of any future testing scheme, and in the meantime, the report has been largely overlooked, with many of the key questions it raised about the difficulties in regulating construction projects simply being swept under the carpet. And if this were not enough, there is the ongoing problem of the time taken getting higher-rise schemes through the Gateway 2 approval process required by the Building Safety Act, with some developers reporting an 11-month wait. Just last week, the chief executive of Homes England claimed that 75% of high-risk schemes have been turned back at Gateway 2 stage. In a recent statement by the Building Safety Minister, it seems as though both sides are blaming each other for delays, with contractors blaming the lack of building control caseworkers and the building safety regulator blaming poor quality of the application by some developers. You would have thought that the building safety regulator, who has admitted to underestimating the challenges of the new regime, would have anticipated the situation and tooled up. On Sky TV, the Deputy Prime Minister recently stated that the matter was being resolved with extra resources being allocated. But don't hold your breath. What a mess. And finally, we move on to more pressure on construction skills. Now, just when you thought things couldn't get worse in the labour market, a white paper on immigration with a proposal to raise the skills threshold to approximately equivalent of a degree level for immigrants was published on the 12th of May. If implemented, this will have a major impact on construction, as currently bricklayers, roofers and construction supervisors are considered to be below the proposed new level. In addition, a 32% increase in the immigration skills charge is proposed. The only hope is construction will be placed on the temporary shortage list. But once again, watch this space. Also last week, a scheme to make it mandatory for domestic builders to be licensed came a step closer. The proposed scheme, which has been doing the rounds since 2021, would be funded by industry, with initial and renewal checks built into the system. For many people, domestic construction work is where the construction industry meets the public, and currently there are too many road builders out there, giving the industry a poor reputation. Well, that's all for this episode. I hope that you found it interesting. Thank you for listening to the end. We admire your stamina. This has been a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. Barney and I would really appreciate it if you were to spread the word, subscribe, and, if you have the time, write a review. And while I'm talking about Barney, sorry if you received an incomplete version of this podcast last week. Barney pressed the wrong button. Until next time, take care.